All right, welcome back to the morning update show. And man, this just tells you how talented Aya is. Because right now, Aya is directing the show, but in a little bit, Aya is going to be over here. Aya D'Alessandro, please bring in Kevin Schofield.
Hey, good morning.
There he is.
How you guys doing?
Kevin?
Hey, Trey, I have to tell you, I was listening to you guys at the top of the show, and I have to share something with you. I am also a proud member of Capricorn Club.
There we go. Another hard worker right there. Shout out to you, my Capricorny brother.
Just blew it. All right, Kevin. So, you know what we got over here as far as overlays and stuff like that. And so we'll wait for you to tell us to put it up. But the mayor announced this ARPA funding yesterday. It looks like it's a lot of money that came in. It's a lot of money that's going out. So why don't you walk us through it?
Yeah, so the mayor and Council President Gonzalez and the Council Budget Chair Mosqueda announced yesterday their draft plan for how to spend the first part of the federal ARPA funding that they're getting. That's the American Rescue Plan Act. They expect to get $128 million this summer from that. And they're putting a bunch of buckets. So, one of the graphics you have there is sort of the top level buckets that they have there. Yeah. And so they've got in these different 5 buckets. When you start breaking it down, you see, some interesting sort of big spends on things. $25 million in direct aid to individuals. This kind of builds on a plan, on a previous program run by the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, although the $25 million is supposed to go hopefully to a broader set of people than just immigrants and refugees, but it'll definitely hit that community as well. $28 million to build new permanent housing, and they're hoping to match that with new state funding also from the ARPA funding to get to about $90 million altogether. That should build about 300 more units of permanent affordable housing for the city. $15 million for reopening city government. We heard a little while ago, you guys were talking about reopening a bunch of library branches. So that would help with that, as well as parks, arts programs, city buildings. They've got to, retrofit some city buildings to make sure that they're safe, as we come out of COVID. There's going to be about $22 million in stabilization grants for small businesses, for nonprofits, arts and culture organizations, community organizations. And in particular with that, they want to make sure that they get to organizations that may not have been eligible for earlier rounds of COVID relief funding. There were definitely some groups that got left out from those. And then about $20 million in homelessness spending to sort of build on money that was already budgeted for programs and expand them a bit more. Diversion, rapid rehousing, an RV safe lot, tiny home villages, build some more tiny homes, and some hotel room space. Now, when you look into this, you see that there's a lot of earmarks for, council members' pet projects and some of the usual suspects organizations that are really close to City Hall. We see childcare, gender-based violence support and prevention programs, direct aid to immigrants and refugees we talked about already, Stay Healthy Streets, job retraining and apprenticeship. And, those are all great programs to fund. But, one of the issues with this is they're spreading this peanut butter really thin. So, the RV safe lot, that's going to do maybe 25 RVs, they think. And while there's, thousands of people literally living in their cars and RVs in the city, they expect they're going to create about 130 units of homeless shelter. So that's really just going to be a drop in the bucket. About $400,000 for tiny homes, which that might be about, they run $20,000 to $25,000 a piece. That's 16 to 20 tiny homes. So about 300 units of new affordable housing. When you sort of look at that compared to the scale of the big investment, the big issues that we're dealing with in the city, it kind of feels a bit disappointing because it doesn't really feel like there's any big ideas, nothing really transformative. We've heard our city officials, the mayor and city council members saying we want to build back better. But you look through this and it's really hard to see anything that goes, okay, is this building back better? It's all good stuff. It's, and everybody's going to get their little slice of the pie to this. Nobody can come back to elected officials and complain that they were completely ignored. But you really kind of have to ask, is this a missed opportunity to kind of step back and do something big that might make Seattle a little different?
You know what, Kevin? I just love that you ushered that in because I agree with you in terms of this being spread very thin. One of the things that has really been coming out from, so many different community groups is, the need for institutions, right? When we think about this federal funding kind of coming in, at the end of the day, what's really necessary is for there to be a sustainable way to ensure that the issues that this money can address is addressed all the time and not just
Right.
with this drop of money. So I agree there. I'm not sure what they're looking at in terms of how the money will get dispensed. Do you know anything about that in terms of how they may be able to issue this money out?
Well, a lot of it is going to come back to programs that already exist, putting more money into programs that exist. So they don't need to come up with new ways for how this to get out. So I mentioned the example of the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. They've had a COVID relief program that got direct aid out to individuals, and so this is going to be another round of that. So wherever possible, they're looking on ways to leverage programs and avenues that they already have. I think for a bunch of these, there'll probably be RFPs that come out from city departments. But you raise a really good issue, Trey, about sustainability of these, right? And this is an issue for this kind of funding because it's one-time funding. Well, I guess you could sort of say it's two-time funding because next year, about a year from now, they're going to get another 116 million coming in. But for any program that they want to be sustainable for the long term, they're going to have to figure out how to build that into the base budget. And that's one of the questions that I asked the city budget office officials earlier this week when they were kind of rolling this out to the press in a pre-briefing. I said, for the money that's going into things like reopening the libraries or, parks programs, how are you going to make sure those are sustainable? And so they're going to have some work to do in, as they plan next year's budget and the year after budget to make sure that, as revenues start to come back to the city, that they add to the base budget of the city, add back in the funding they need to sustain anything that we want to be anything other than a one-off that comes out of this money.
Some of the, I saw some comments out there from different people running for office, things like that said there wasn't enough of this money spread over to the homelessness side of things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in particular, former council president Bruce Harrell, who's now running for mayor, as basically, within a few minutes of this announcement came out, he put out a press release reiterating stuff that he'd said earlier in the week and last week, saying that he really thought that the majority of this money should go to homelessness. And, in particular, kind of coming back to this notion of, are we making any big bets with this, right? Or is this going to be just kind of spread across everything and kind of incrementally try to sort of bring everything back up again?
Well, it's this issue of homelessness as well. Is just like, okay, put resources clearly for people who are experiencing homelessness, but are there any resources there for upstream? I mean, there's quite a few people who are now living in their car, living in their RV, living on the streets of Seattle, where if there was an intersection upstream, they wouldn't necessarily be there. I don't know if I don't want to put you on the spot, but I don't know if that's exactly with former council member Harrell is speaking to or not, or just as far as resources for people who are currently on the street. But that's one of the problems that never gets solved because they never go far enough upstream to solve the problem.
Yeah, and there are programs that the city and the county do. A couple of them, there's a diversion program. There's what they call rapid rehousing, and they're both aimed at catching people just as they're becoming homeless and before they really end up on the street, catching them right then, and then intervening in a way that will get them back into housing, immediately and stop them from ever actually becoming homeless. And, part of what the mayor and city council are proposing here will put a little bit more money into those programs that already exist. I'm just looking through about $6.7 million for rapid rehousing. I'm not finding the diversion. Diversion about 1.3 million. So a little bit more money into those programs, and those programs have actually proven to be very, very effective. So that will certainly help. It's unclear how many people that will help compared to the the 10,000, 12,000 people are homeless in King County, a big chunk of which are actually, living unsheltered, on the streets of Seattle right now. The best estimate is probably around 3,800, about 4,000 people living unsheltered on our city streets right now. So, there's a big need. Again, this, what the mayor and city council are proposing is an incremental bit more. There's nothing bad that, but there's nothing in here that will actually solve the problem of that either. We're just kind of chipping away at these things.
Yeah, that's really what I'm hearing, to be honest, is that it's a bit of a chip away and not enough really being done to ensure that, this is really getting treated kind of as a public health crisis, as we've been saying, is really necessary around this COVID and this kind of economic relief right now. Kevin, straight up, I mean, are Black folks going to get any of this money?
Well, I think I think the answer is yes, but it's spread out into so many little buckets that a lot of it is going to be hard to spot. There's some money in here for apprenticeship programs, for job retraining programs, and I think that folks in the Black community will benefit from that. I certainly hope that folks in the Black community will benefit from the direct aid programs. And I can't speak for the mayor or the city council on how exactly they're going to decide to prioritize those as it runs through the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. But from what I hear from them, their intent is certainly to make sure that there's broad opportunities for people to benefit from that. The certainly within the homeless population in Seattle, the Black community is significantly overrepresented. So investments in homelessness programs will help. And in fact, when you look at the data for the homelessness programs they put in place, the people they're serving are also overrepresent Black people. So that there has certainly been effort, in the city and in the county and in local homeless providers to realize that the Black community is overrepresented and trying to address that. But, it is a super hard problem, and the problem is much, much larger than the amount of money and resources that we put into them.
Yeah, this is exactly what we're talking about here because, unfortunately, when I think about something like childcare and it goes like, okay, look, maybe you can get your childcare paid for the last 6 months or, next 6 months or something. But then it's like a drop in that bucket. And then what is that mother or father or family supposed to do in terms of how to sustain it? So it goes back to sustainability for me and also the dispersion. I mean, we've dealt with the fact of there's a lot of harm that comes when we think about this RFP process. And, council and city government, they really have an opportunity to figure out a different way. I think utilizing some of the models that you described there with the Office of Refugee and Immigrants, that, they had a direct way to do, hey, we're going to give it to these specific groups because, again, being plugged in. From your perspective here, Kevin, as we kind of look at how spread this money is, I got to ask you about this impact. At the end of the day, this money is really there to be a rescue plan, right? How much is it rescuing?
Yeah, well, I look at this and, there's obviously the political part of this where they're trying to spread it out enough so that everybody who comes and asks them for money feels like they're getting something out of this. And, I think it's sort of at a bigger level, is this rescue about helping over the next 6 months for the city to get back on its feet? Or is it about building back better? Is it about trying to realize that the city is going to look different coming out of this pandemic? And what do we need to change so that we really are better, so that we're prepared for what the world looks like coming out of this pandemic? And I think it's really more of the former than the latter in terms of what they've got on paper right now, right? This is going to help a lot over the next 6 months. It's going to get some money into people's hands. It's going to get some stabilization grants out into, the hands of small business owners and local community organizations. But, it's going to sort of get us maybe a little faster back to where we were in January 2020. But we're not really, there's nothing really in here I can look at and say, yeah, things are going to look different when we, based on doing this, when we come out of this.
What in there, Kevin? I guess we got maybe time for one more question here. What in there is economic drivers? I mean, a lot of stuff. I mean, of course, which is needed. We talk about a lot of the basically social or social service programs and everything else. What is in there is to be a catalyst for economic drivers. I mean, is there support a lot of our businesses? um, barely made it through, but they made it through. They're still here, but people need help. These are people, these are businesses that employ people. You know what I'm saying? And where are
Yeah.
the jobs? Are there any? Or is there anything there in the budget where the city is hiring people or programs that are hiring people? I mean, people want jobs. People want to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. Small businesses need help to continue to employ people and everything else. Is there something
Yeah.
in there for that?
Well, there's definitely a big chunk of money in there for small business grants, and I think that's good. One of the weird political issues in the city is that our elected officials, particularly some in the city council, have really demonized big business, right? And so, certainly you look at Amazon, and Amazon doesn't need financial help from the city, and nobody's arguing that Amazon needs financial help from the city. But you look at Holland American Cruises, which is Seattle based. And that is that's a company that's been completely devastated, and they're dependent, not only on the cruise business, but on people feeling safe coming to Seattle to board a cruise ship here or to get off for a couple of days here and spend a bunch of money in the local community. And but because City Hall has demonized anything that might be considered big business, there's no money in here that would really benefit sort of bigger businesses that might hire back a lot of people. So it's going to be a lot of sort of small incremental. This small business might be able to hire back 1 or 2 people. This one might be able to hire back 2 or 3 people, rather than sort of larger scale things that might change the or accelerate the way that some of the bigger employers in the city might recover. And again, nobody's arguing that Amazon or Microsoft need a financial bailout. But there's a lot of, what about Nordstrom, right? Nordstrom, got pummeled and they're a big Seattle business, right? And, is there anything in here that would help them recover? No, there's nothing in here. And that may be too much to ask about that, but there is I do think we do need to acknowledge the political environment that's been created in the city that makes it hard for the city to even broach the subject of doing something that might help medium to big sized businesses.
Yeah.
All right. Kevin Schofield. Kevin, do you have this up on your website?
Yeah, so I wrote an article about this. Just a couple last thoughts here. So there's got another 35 million coming from sort of more targeted parts of the ARPA funding later this summer. So the city council is introducing, this legislation for this 128 million this Tuesday. They want to get that passed out and done by the end of June, but they're going to come back at the end of the summer and deal with this other 35 million they expect. And then in the fall, as they deal with the 2022 budget, they're going to sort of build in the other 116 million that they expect to get from ARPA funding next year.
Wow.
All right, good stuff. And people can find you at sccinsight.com. Right?
Yep.
Everything is there. The wordy and nerdy Kevin Schofield, thank you for taking the time to break this down and go through everything step by step. I encourage people to go to sccinsight.com and read up on it more, man. Have a wonderful weekend, Kevin.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Kevin.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, always great to hear from Kevin, to be honest. And I think that, so much of what he pointed out here is what so many other people are saying. Kevin really do be on the money, man. I got to say.
Yo, I'm saying, like, the amount of time that this guy spends listening to public comment and researching and going through it, it's a lot, but it shows, it comes out in the work.
Yeah.
And so I always call him up and say, man, what's the breakdown on this? Because
Yeah.
some of the stuff they sent out is like 200-300 pages. I can't read it all, but
Give us the details.
yeah, but I really encourage people, sccinsight.com, you go there, you check that out.